Welcome back to Senior Support on Your TV. We're talking to Jessica Chase from the Museums of Prince Edward County, and we covered a lot of ground there, Jessica, in the first half, but our main topic is preserving personal items that people really want to preserve. And so why don't we first start with textiles? And that was your word. So what kinds of things do you mean when you say textiles?
I think the majority of textiles that people do keep from previous generations and from their own sort of lifetime is usually linens, whether it be like table linens or bed linens, and quilts. So yes, linens, sort of blankets and quilts. And I think that the number one thing I would recommend, if you have items like that you want to preserve for as long as possible, I would definitely keep them out of direct sunlight if you can, because something that will crop up across any other materials that we discuss is that basically nothing likes sunlight. So as often as you can, if something's out on a bed in a bright room, don't leave it out there for longer than maybe a few weeks or even a month, and then swap it with something else, just so that you're giving it a break from being in areas of bright light. So that's one thing I would definitely recommend. Another item would be in terms of storage of your items, definitely using acid-free materials that you can store things in. A plastic tote usually will do the trick. That's going to be nice and safe, a neutral space where you can fold gently your quilts or linens and store them. But honestly, if you do have a spare room somewhere where you can pull the blinds, the best way to store those types of linens, quilts especially, is by laying them flat. So you could even lay out multiple quilts on top of each other on a bed that's not being used. And that is going to be where they are at their happiest. But if you do have to fold them and put them away in either a plastic tote or even a hope chest, that's okay. Lots of people keep quilts in hope chests. But when you are folding an item to store it, just folding it on the bias, it's called, or on the diagonal, sort of not on the seams, not where, what do they call that? The warp and weft. You want to go against the grain, essentially, so that you're not aggravating or stressing the seams and not creating creases that are gonna last over time. So you might want to get it out from time to time and refold it along different lines to give it a bit of a break. But those are some of the key bits I'd say regarding textiles specifically.
Well, Jessica, I'm going to have to go home and get out my quilts from my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and maybe further back and refold them, I think. I have some of those types of things in a cedar chest. Is that okay?
Yeah, honestly, it's absolutely fine as long as the temperature and humidity is consistent. As long as there's no dampness, then you should be a-okay with that. And just checking them periodically for any infestations of, little insects, checking for mold, anything like that. Assuming there's no damp, then that shouldn't be an issue. But if you do ever have any little infestation or any insect activity at all, you can actually get out the piece and put it in your freezer for a few days or a week, and give it some time to kill off whatever's been living in your quilts before getting it out again. Maybe giving it a vacuum on a very, very light setting before refolding it and putting it away again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the problem is for people like me, I'm not sure what I'm keeping it for. Keeping these quilts and some of these other items. I have tablecloths and, linen tablecloths and doilies and things like that. But my children are not interested in those things. So I'll keep them nice, and then we'll see what happens in the future, eh? That's a common story.
Often I would say here. Yeah, they're not interested yet, but it's very, very probable that one day they might, or their children might. And that being said, you might only decide to keep a few of those items and part with others. That's normal too. And all of these items do have a lifespan. So, if you wanted to, or if they decided to actually use these pieces instead of keeping them nice and tucked away, then using them is okay too. I think we're big proponents at the museum of, assuming you're not absolutely concerned about keeping something good for as long as humanly possible, using them for their original purpose is really preferred in a lot of instances. Because just like we have a lot of superfluous things in our lives, so did the Victorians, so did the generations that came before them. They all had their stuff that was unnecessary. We all had too much of it. And now we've inherited all of these things. So, you can only keep so much.
Now, let's talk about using dishes, for example, and because there are a lot of dishes that I call them dishes, that people would want to keep.
Well, yes. Dinnerware and flatware as well, lots of cutlery. I mean, ceramics are one of the great things they're very durable. That's the great thing about especially anything glazed, right? Glazed ceramics, assuming you don't break it, it can withstand a lot. Basically, the one thing with ceramics is, you want to keep them out of direct sunlight. Again, avoid sunspots. And also maintain that temperature and humidity, because of course, if they get too hot and then too cold, they can crack. But assuming they're at a consistent temperature, you can keep them safe. And they're actually a really great thing if you have a lot of storage in like a damp. You don't ever want to put items somewhere really damp. But again, a basement or an attic, which aren't ideal spaces for storing textiles, or not really ideal for wood either, and definitely not ideal for paper documents. Ceramics are something that once they're stored in a plastic tote and put away in, a cold, dark corner somewhere, they can withstand that. So if you have space in those areas that you're looking to fill, ceramics should be able to fit in there, not a problem. But I did want to mention, I know a lot of people have silver. Don't over polish it. Don't worry too much about it tarnishing. The tarnish is not hurting it. Only polish your silver when you absolutely need to for display purposes, because every time you polish it, you take off a little bit of the silver with the polish. So just, store them in some silversmith cloths. And if they get a bit of tarnish, that's okay. It's not gonna hurt.